on Monopoly.
Right, and so he would do stuff like let Ronnie Garvin be the fucking champion, and the rest of the territories are like, Ronnie Garvin! Ronnie Garvin!
Ronnie fucking Garvin!
His finisher's a fucking stomp! So, yeah, anyway, so that kind of stuff made him not a super huge fan of other members of the or people weren't huge fans of him in the NWA. But while we're talking about the NWA and the WWF fucking with each other like that, they ran WrestleMania 4, right? On pay-per-view. They were like, fuck it, it's gonna be great. WrestleMania 4 from Trump Plaza or wherever the hell it was from.
It was Trump Plaza, yeah.
And the NWA was like, cool, we're gonna run something called the Clash of the Champions for free on TBS at the same fucking time. And it did really well, and it hurt the buy rate of WrestleMania. I mean, the Clash of Champions 1 was Flair Sting, right? That 90 limit or that 60-minute time limit draw.
Yes,
where he had him in the score. Like, I remember the crowd was going bananas for Sting. I watched it fairly recently. Like in the last 10 years. So I remember being like, "Damn, this crowd is hot," and they were.
Yeah. Time limit draw.
And just barely, too.
45-minute match.
That made Sting,
made Sting, like, a huge...
So, anyway, this happened a couple other times. They tried to preempt each other, and they did. But apparently this expansion had been costly. They've been, like, doing shows wrong. They hadn't been, like... They've been trying to expand in places that didn't make... You know how ROH expanded? They just kind of gradually expanded.
Right. It's a gradual growth.
Right. Like, ROH... Like, Jim Crockett Promotions did not do that.
No.
They were like, fuck it, we're national. We're going to run North Carolina tonight because it's a strong town, and then we're going to pop out to Vegas. They've never even been to Vegas. Like, who the fuck knows who they are, you know? Like... So, they did a lot of that. But... in 1988, Jim Crockett Promotions was sold to Ted Turner.
Boo.
And renamed World Championship Wrestling.
Because
of the shows being called World Championship Wrestling.
Well, also Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying.
I mean, you didn't know? I thought it was based on the fact that all the shows were called World Championship Wrestling.
I mean, that would make sense too. But.
So... Early 89 is good for the company. WCW, NWA are pretty much one and the same. They've got Flair Steamboat, Flair Funk. You got the Steiners, the Road Warriors, Luger, Muta, Brian Pillman. Like, it was, I remember 89, like, we're going back watching 89 to 90. Just solid fucking years for the NWA. And then the 90s happened, and there was like a shit show of things like the RoboCop debacle, the Black Scorpion storyline. I guess in 91, the WCW officially separated from the NWA. Not officially separated, but they were like, we are our own organization outside of the NWA.
Right.
Because they had their own world titles, but... For a long time, the NWA title was still, and the WCW champion was Ric Flair.
Yes.
So then he's supposed to drop the title. He doesn't want to drop the title. Jim Herd fires him. He shows up in the WWF with the title, real world champion, because they owed him money. The NWA owed him money,
right,
for a deposit he put on the belt.
Yeah, that was another thing that since the inception, when you were champion, you had to put a deposit down. Essentially for the title, because they didn't want you just running off with that belt.
Right.
So that's essentially, and the belt got bigger by the time Ric Flair was doing this. So he was like, well, fine.
The big gold belt.
Big gold belt.
So he takes it. Eventually they pay him back. He gives the belt back. So now, in the interim that this title has been on the in the WWF, WCW had to put a new title out there. So they've got the WCW World Heavyweight title out there. Because before, remember, it was one and the same.
Right.
Same belt. It was whatever. They didn't care. But now they have the NWA title back, the big gold belt. And they're like, I guess this is the NWA title again. So now they have two world champions again. Ric Flair does his thing in the WWF, becomes two-time champion. The 93 decides he's coming back. He comes back in and wins the NWA title. Not the WCW World title, the NWA World title. And so now whoever's left in the NWA is like, we want Ric Flair to come defend in our territories. Mm-hmm. This is like, the mid-90s or the early to mid-90s at this point, and all the whoever's still kicking out there is like Eastern Championship Wrestling.
Right.
That would, a promotion like that would have been like, we want Ric Flair to come defend his NWA World Title like he's supposed to.
Like the bylaws say.
And then they were essentially at that point, the WCW was like, seriously, fuck it, we're out.
Yeah.
They said, we are done with this shit. We're keeping this belt. This belt belongs to us. It's now the WCW International Heavyweight title. Mm-hmm. And now the NWA doesn't have a champion. For about a year, apparently.
Right.
Like, they just kind of sat there for a year, and finally they were like, okay, cool, we're going to get with Eastern Championship Wrestling, with Todd Gordon, we're going to have a tournament, we're going to crown a new NWA title. And so they do, and Shane Douglas beats Too Cold Scorpio, then obviously is like, fuck this title, throws it down, I'm the ECW World Champion. The Eastern Championship Wrestling immediately resigns from the NWA.
Also, if you haven't, a lot of you newer fans, we'll call you that.
Youngins.
Eastern Championship Wrestling was the predecessor to Extreme Championship Wrestling. So this franchise, Shane Douglas, was born more or less on this night.
Right.
And this promo is world famous. Go look up Shane Douglas throw down the NWA title, and that promo is gold.
I remember watching it.
Best promo he's ever done.
I absolutely. Well, Shane Douglas is not very good on the mic.
That's why I said best promo he's ever done.
I remember watching it in the early parts of the Attitude Era, being like, dude, this promo is so sick. And just the fact, knowing that from that moment, they would do all those really great things in ECW in 95, 96, 97, up to 98, 99. You're just like, wow, this is insane. And that is interesting to me, that it itself got its genesis from the NWA World Heavyweight title.
I was going to bring that up later, but go ahead.
So, at this point, after this happens, the NWA is kind of in tatters. You're talking about the mid to late 90s, when professional wrestling is on fucking fire culturally.
Exactly.
And the NWA is nowhere to be found. We had an NWA promotion here in Dallas. It was like NWA Southwest. I never went to a show.
Neither did I.
I wanted to, but I was very young whenever I remember the shows. I wasn't able to take myself. Mm-hmm. And then once I got a car, I was like, well, there's more important things to do.
Wait, girls? What?
Yes. So I didn't really... I didn't spend a whole lot of time trying to find those kind of promotions. And the NWA name was kind of dormant until TNA picked it up in the mid-2000s.
2002.
For their world and world tag titles. But then, in 2007, I think.
It's actually 2004.
Oh, 2000.
So they I was just looking this up. They founded in 2002 and then withdrew from the NWA in 2004. So 2 full years.
But they still used the title for a while.
Right, they did.
Because they
used continued to use the title as part of the agreement until their agreement ended in 2007. So
then
ridiculous.
The NWA title was again kind of defended on the indies. I remember seeing Blue Demon. Blue Demon defended at ROH shows.
Right.
He also defended
Colt Cabana's been a former champion.
Well,
Adam Steele's been a champion.
I was after the Blue Demon stuff.
Oh, right.
After the Blue Demon stuff, a lot of the weird behind the scenes shit happened. Mm-hmm. Like a promoter, R. Bruce Tharp, Houston-based attorney and wrestling promoter. It doesn't sound real. Yeah. It sounds terrible. It sounds totally made up.
It's like a FARP of a name.
He sued the NWA over like not adequate insurance for, I guess, an event maybe they had done together. And somehow ended up with the company.
What?
Yeah, he sued them, and then they were like, well, you can just have the company. And I guess he was like, okay, cool.
What kind of settlement is this?
I don't know. So while this is all happening, Colt Cabana and Adam Pearce are having some really great matches in championship wrestling from Hollywood, which is kind of the mainstay NWA show in that early 2010 period. And then the titles were just defended kind of all over the place, and indies and NWAs and local shows, nothing to write home about. No one, I mean, some people of note had the titles, I think Davey Boy Smith. During that time frame, they actually had when Bruce Tharp ran the promotion. They actually had the NWA and NWA World Tag titles on New Japan a couple times. They were defended and won in New Japan a couple times. So right as I think professional wrestling was starting to get like boiling again in other parts of the world, not just America. And then in March of 2017, Billy Corgan, of all people, of the Smashing Pumpkins,
so ridiculous,
bought the NWA, vacated all the titles, although I think they've come back around and like said now Jazz is still a champion.
Yeah, because she's in the women's title match tonight.
Yeah, but she's still the champion. But like when he got it, he essentially was like, all the titles are vacant except for the World Heavyweight title. And then put his focus on that for about a year. I think they actually... I read this, I didn't realize it, but in early 2018, they went with Impact, and they did like an empty arena match as a qualifier for an NWA World Title match.
Oh.
And then, but by the mid part of 2018 until now, obviously, they've been more aligned with Ring of Honor. Nick Aldis has done the show on... he's been to 2 shows and he'd wrestled Flip Gordon on one.
Right.
At an ROH show.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, they did All In. Cody's the champion.
Cody is the champ. And tonight we'll see a 2 out of 3 falls match.
We will. I think it's been an interesting. What I titled this, "The Rise, the Fall, and the Future" of the NWA.
Question mark?
Because I think the NWA could use its storied past to influence its future.
Right.
In a way that professional wrestling is kind of a lot of territories right now.
Mm-hmm.
But not in the same way that they're all obviously governed by one body, yada, yada, yada.
Right, because you don't need that many people trying to decide the future of that many companies.
But, like, you see guys like, I don't know, like, even a guy like Brian Cage or the Lucha Brothers, like, they're in Impact. They are sometimes in Major League Wrestling. They are in other indies. They are in other companies. And you, like House of Hardcore, stuff like that. Like, promotions that have streaming capabilities and the ability to get to every wrestling fan out there.
Exactly.
I mean, think about it. What we were talking about earlier. I've watched more wrestling today than I have in months, and none of it was WWE except for the new NXT UK show.
Which is a fun show. I
Hella
watched that
fun.
as well. Yeah.
Hella fun. Mustache Mountain is so over.
Well, that's what's great about European fans, I think, is that the chants and the songs that they actually have are far better. Because they're all soccer hooligans or football hooligans. So
it's made to go together.
Exactly. But yes, I also believe the NWA doesn't need to be anything it was before. It genuinely needs to use its history and learn from it and then go forward and say, hey, either we're our own company or our guys can just kind of go wherever. As long as our championship is being seen on all these different platforms, it kind of brings up the prestige of it again.
I mean, that's one of those things that we've talked about it before. It's just you can jump. Jericho was on New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing his own boat thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. He showed up at All In.
He was at Raw 25.
Who knows where that dude's going to show up next?
He could have been at SmackDown 1000 if they wanted him to.
But the NWA title could just be like you're saying. I mean, it was defended in Japan before. I could see it being defended in Japan again. I could see it being defended in ROH. If the NWA does more shows like this, who knows? The sky's the limit. I think if you use your history to build on your future, I think the NWA has the prestige to be like, hey, because like you and I are talking about the NWA in 2018,
right? Who thought
so?
5 years ago, at least, we'd be like, why are we talking about? You talking about the rap group? Yeah, let's talk about.
Yeah,
those
I love
guys.
the NWA. They're so good.
Yeah, Dr. Dre is amazing.
Ice Cube, mwah. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the National Wrestling Alliance. But yes, 5 years ago, I would have been like, "You're out of your mind. No one cares about the rest of the NWA. Who even is the NWA World Champion?
Is that still a thing? It's in a museum somewhere, right? Like that's where I can go see that belt.
Because no one has.
No one has. However, we now can look at the NWA and we see companies like ECW branching off from them, TNA branching off from them, WWF branched off from them, AWA branched. The JWA, which is the Japanese Pro Wrestling Alliance, was founded because of the NWA. And then from there, we got All Japan Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling.
And in some ways, Pro Wrestling Noah, because Pro Wrestling Noah was a split from All Japan.
And Dragon Gate and DDT. And so we have all these offshoots of the NWA.
I mean, I think it's important. I think that's why the NWA